We're going to switch application scenarios again, talking about board games. And what I like about this work is really that it tried to also to include people that, well, were born with visual impairment and may not have the same access to normal board games as visually sighted people do. And Lauren's going to tell us about how we can include them as well. And the nice thing about this is that it's not just games for visually impaired people, but it's about games that can be played together. Take it away.
Thank you very much. Can you see my slide in full screen?
Yes, we're good.
Okay, so hi, thank you, Jacob. So I'm Lauren Thevin, and I will present our work with Nicolas Rodier, Bernard Oriola, Martin Hachet, Christophe Jouffrais, and Anke about inclusive adaptation of existing board games for gamers with and without visual impairments. And for that, we use a Spatial Augmented Reality framework for touch detection and audio feedback to provide the additional accessibility features. So maybe you enjoy playing board games, and because of the interaction with the other players, or because you like to manipulate token and as well the decision-making process. But however, if you have you may have visual impairment as well, and then accessibility of games may hinder you access to these three different elements. So when you want to play board game with visual impairments, usually you have three solutions. The first one is to play to accessible games by design. For instance, you can have accessible material with asymmetric tiles or relief information. And you may have accessible rules, game rules as well in written, digital or audio format. Another solution is to play to a digital version of existing board games, because then with digital version you can adapt inputs and outputs, and it can be either specialized games like audio games or universal version, universal design, so everybody can play to the same games. And actually there is a last main option, that is to use handcrafted adaptations. And here actually amateur like parents, here a tutorial from parents can adapt games like memory games with tactile information, but professionals have as well adaptation process. Here a picture of dice that were adapted with tactile stickers. And here another example of figurines and pawns with a pedestal and magnets. But actually there are some limitations. First, a lot of mass market board games are not accessible by design. And fully digital adaptation versions are less oriented around interaction with the other co-players or co-located players and token manipulations, while handcraft adaptation may not solve all the accessibility issues and challenges, because there are less control about inputs and outputs like in digital versions. So here, between handcrafted adaptations and digital games, is there any room for augmented reality? And our motivation behind this question is to keep existing material and interactions with physical player, because it's the main part of enjoyment in board games, and as well to overcome the current limitations of handcrafted adaptations. And why to think about adaptation more than in creating all the board game accessible is there is a lot of existing board games in mass market. And if more people can play to that thanks to adaptations, then it will be better for inclusion and, for instance, for sharing common pop culture. So our study was in three parts. The first one, in the first part, we studied what was were the existing handcraft adaptation techniques of a professional organization called Accessijeux. Then in the second part, we created a framework for generic adaptations of board games called GameARt. And in the last part, we did a user study with adaptations of a JamaicAR board game and this adaptation is called JamaicAR. So for the first part, when we studied the existing handcrafted adaptation techniques, we studied more than 30 games successfully and unsuccessfully adapted board games by a specialized and professional organization and a game editor called Hachet and Hachet Games. Our output was agreed with the observed issues for accessibility and the proposed fixes. So here an overview of what you can find on the paper for more information. And actually, we provide a description of the issues. We say if it's a simple fix with limited resources and expertise and time, or a medium fixes with more resources, more expertise needed and more time. And we as well say if there are remaining issues. And then in the last column, we say the fixes and the possible remaining issues. In total, 14 issues are not fully adaptable with handcrafted techniques. 10 are about the spatial layout and the information for decision-making associated to this part. And 2 are about the text and 2 are about the gameplay. In the following, we want to keep the gameplay, so we more focus on the spatial layout and about the text. And for that, this brings motivation for spatial augmented reality because of some related work. First, audio tactile information provided by spatial augmented reality shows that interactivity and pleasure in use is increased, as well as the spatial understanding of the layout. So this answers the first point of the remaining issues. And the second part was the text, and actually spatial augmented reality can provide audio feedback on demand with dynamic content. Then we can solve the text issues. So here, more information about our framework for generic adaptations of board games. We use a framework based on PayPart toolkit for spatial augmented reality. And this toolkit works with a video projector for visual feedback and speakers for audio feedback. There is a depth camera and a microphone, so we can provide touch detection as the finger detected by the depth camera as well as the phone, and provide multimodal feedback registered with the microphone for audio feedback. And we call this framework GameARt with 2 modes, edition modes and play modes, and I will give you just more information just on the next slide. So for the main features, actually in play modes, the idea is to provide feedback when the player are touching boxes on the game board. So here an example, when the person is touching the box called 50A, and the feedback will be given. Oui. I don't know if you got the audio feedback. And then there is a second part that is to provide a generic description of the game state from pawn detection.
Détection 5, 4. Le joueur rouge est à la case. Le joueur bleu est à la case. Le joueur vert.
So here 2 elements from the audio description. During the calibration process, the system learned to track the pawn and to associate the good audio description of the pawn. So it can be the name of the player, or here it was a color. And as well, we create some different kind of interactive areas some are triggered by touch and some are triggered by the pawn. So we can register specific feedback for when the player touch boxes or when the pawn touch some boxes. Yeah, so here in edition mode, actually the idea is to record the feedback that will be provided during the game. So there are pawn audio description, pawn areas, touch areas, and we can have as well dice and deck areas. Here, the recording of a third zone in an example. So we just touch a surface to give a feedback and record it.
3.
And the feedback are combined.
1, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1.
And with our system, we can record and reload later the created adaptations, so we can share or use one adaptation several times. Then to enhance accessibility, actually the interactive areas can follow fiducial markers and then follow the board game. So here an example. We as well keep the physical fixes as shown on our first part of the study. So here texture board on the left to locate the interactive areas. Here wavy pattern and relief, and we can and we added as well fiducial markers, so the interactive area follows the board and automatically adapt to the board position. So finally, in the last part, we evaluate our system with a user study and the adaptation of JamaicAR board game. And our objectives were to know if there is a possible, if it is possible to adapt a game that is not adaptable otherwise, only with handcrafted techniques. And is it inclusive? So for that, we studied JamaicAR that is not playable with handcrafted adaptation only, and that is an existing mass market game. In the study, the game sessions was, we did game sessions with 15 participants, 5 group of 3 people actually, and this group was all with people with visual impairments or with people without visual impairments, or mixed group with people with and without visual impairments. And we evaluated the game user experience with a guess scale and the user experience with the EAQ questionnaire. Here I will only present the EAQ questionnaire, but you can find more information on the paper. So the result for attractiveness, pragmatic quality, and hedonic quality for people with visual impairment on the left and without visual impairment for the right shows that in average, I mean, the results are average to good for sighted players and for players with visual impairments. We cannot higher novelty for a sighted player. Then we have a higher hedonic scale on that. And actually the players from our questionnaire and interview with the players, the players with visual impairment are used to have audio feedback and audio description with interactivity or smartphones. And this is not the case for sighted player. For the player with visual impairment, actually the pragmatic value is on our sample a bit higher for players with visual impairments, because they thought this is a useful features, or they are useful filters, while sighted people say, okay, it is nice system, but I don't need them and I can play board games without that. So for the guest questionnaire, you can refer to our paper. And to conclude, the advantages of our system is to make some game playable and fun, while it would have been impossible otherwise, because even adaptation techniques does not work. And we have a good complementarity of physical objects and digital augmentation. So this include as well the feature related to the game state description that is really important in case of competitive game, because also why people with visual impairment ask a question, a specific questions that give clues about their strategy. And we can record with our system and reload adaptations later or to share them. For the limits, the game is playable, why it would be impossible otherwise, but the gameplay is still not entirely fair. And it is a game that is not playable otherwise because there are complicated rules according to the participant with visual impairment. The interactive features bring some bugs that can have a different lead to different perception from people with visual impairments or people or sighted people that can detect the bug but would not have these bugs otherwise. And the system is still not entirely accessible because the setup and the calibration cannot be done by people with visual impairments. So thank you for listening, and if you have any question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lauren, and congratulations again for your Best Paper Award. This is really important work. Sadly, we're running a bit short on time because I would love to have like a more elaborate discussion on this. Are there any questions from the physical or online audience? Because then I would just ask a very brief question. So you have shown a lot of like ways of dealing with like the limitations of visually impaired people. And I would love to know if like the findings or like the what you found out could also be transferred to different types of board games, or it's like, do you need to start the progress for every different sort of board game, or is there some like general guidelines that you could like advise on if somebody wants to create games like these? So
actually you can find on the paper the guidelines, and as the organization we worked with and that collaborate with us, Accessition now send to their partner game editors these guidelines. So the issues grid you can find on the paper can give you a good idea about what can be fixed before or when designing a game. For instance, how to have accessible dice. There are guidelines for tiles, tokens, coins, and paper money, for instance. There are some figurines, way to adapt or make like figurines that can be different just by touch or with different shape. So that can work as well. There are some still some issues that cannot be fixed. For instance, I don't know if you know the games werewolf game of
yes.
So here there is a team that need silently to vote for somebody to exclude from the game. For the game, and here if you have a visual impairment and you are in this team, you have to vote silently with the other people, and that make really complicated the vote because you show people and say you try to design and to silently collaborate, and this is something really complicated. But so in short, yes, there are lots that can be done, and this is a way to use the grid of all the different issues we found, because you can anticipate. I don't know. Yeah, here. Does it answer the question?
Yes, certainly. Thank you very much.
Thank you.